Coming up on our newscast tonight. South Korea's new finance chief meets with the nation's central banker for the first time since taking office. The duo shared their assessment of the local economy, discussed ways to boost growth, and vowed to hold this type of meeting more often. Seoul's government announced new towns and cities to be developed to help alleviate lack of housing in the metropolitan area. The plan is designed to meet rising demand in the densely populated areas and help curb real estate prices. U.S. Special Representative for North Korea Stephen Biegun is in Seoul for talks on denuclearization issues with his South Korean counterpart. Upon arrival, he announced Washington plans to review certain policies to allow humanitarian assistance to the regime. NEWSCENTER begins now. It's 8 p.m. here in Korea, live from our studio in Seoul. This is Arirang News Center. Welcome to our program. I'm Daniel Che. Seoul's finance chief met with the nation's central banker for the first time since taking on that ministerial post. While sharing their assessment of the economy and discussing ways to boost growth, the duo also agreed to meet more regularly. Kim Jong-yang has our top story.
Korea's new finance minister Hong Nam-gi and the Bank of Korea Governor Lee Ju-yeol held their first meeting since Minister Hong took office last week, and they vowed to work closely to tackle domestic and external uncertainties.
There are many domestic and external risks like household debt, U.S. rate hike, global financial volatility, the U.S.-China trade spat, and so on. We plan to carry out expansionary fiscal policy with our $418 billion budget, but fiscal policy itself is not enough. Coordination with monetary policies is also important.
The central bank and the Ministry of Economy and Finance have already lowered their growth forecast for the nation to around 2.7% for 2019. During their 70-minute-long lunch on Wednesday, Minister Hong and Governor Lee shared their concerns that a sluggish job market and investment could further weigh on the nation's growth despite solid exports. Regarding the widely expected rate hike by the U.S. Federal Reserve on Thursday morning Korea time, the finance minister said the government will hold an emergency meeting to monitor and hedge against possible risks. Overall, the two economic policymakers said finding a new growth engine, increasing economic vitality, and narrowing wealth gap is important.
The economic policy direction announced Monday shows the government's will to support the economy. The central bank will work closely in various ways to boost Korea's economic vitality.
The finance minister and the Bank of Korea governor vowed to hold such meetings more often to share their assessments of the economy and coordinate policies to help boost domestic growth. Kim Jong-yang, Arirang News.
Staying here in the nation, the government announced dozens of sites near Seoul that'll be used to build housing to ease the shortage in and around the capital. These areas will even get their own high-speed rail connection to help get them downtown in under half an hour. Here's Kim Ji-yeon with the details.
The Ministry of Land, Infrastructure and Transport announced on Wednesday the new towns and cities it will develop to help alleviate the lack of housing in the Seoul metropolitan area, which is seen as one of the main factors driving up real estate prices. Along with 37 sites in Seoul, housing sites of more than 1 million square meters will be created in Namyangju, Hanam, and Gwacheon in Gyeonggi Province and in Incheon's Gangneung district. The ministry says that developments are expected to provide a combined 155,000 houses in these areas by 2021.
The participation rate of municipal governments and state corporations during the project implementation process was more than 90%. We'll try our utmost to tailor the project to local needs through increased communication.
The ministry also announced plans to create a public transport system connecting the new suburban areas, including the Great Train Express or GTX high-speed rail network, to enable residents in the new suburban areas to commute to downtown Seoul in less than 30 minutes. The ministry said that during the selection process, it also considered whether the locations could help foster new jobs and startups. This is the government's third phase of developing housing in the Seoul metropolitan area to cater to rising demand in the densely populated capital. The first round of development took place in the 1990s and created cities like Bundang and Ilsan, followed by the Pangyo, Gwangyo, and Wide developments in the 2000s. Kim Jong-yang, Arirang News.
National Security Advisor Gangneung hosted a meeting on cybersecurity policies on Wednesday. Representatives of 13 different government offices, including the Education Ministry as well as Ministries of Economy and Foreign Affairs, took part. Those present discussed how to proceed with the national cybersecurity strategies created for the first time by the Moon administration. They also went over the South Korean status to fight cyber threats and its preparedness to deal with cyber attacks. According to the presidential office, interministerial cooperation will be enhanced by sharing information and implementing programs to protect cyberspace from hackings or network paralysis. Following a recent accident involving the death of a subcontract worker, the ruling party and government have called for a fundamental reform of workplace health and safety. They're also mulling ways to improve conditions for temporary workers. Kim Min-ji tells us more.
South Korea's ruling Democratic Party and the government have vowed all-out efforts to pass a revision to the law on occupational safety and health before the end of this year. The two sides held an emergency meeting on Wednesday in the wake of a recent accident at a local power plant that claimed a worker's life. The 24-year-old, employed by a subcontractor, was found after he got caught in a conveyor belt while working the night shift alone, something that, according to regulation, should have been done in pairs. His death, critics claim, show how outsourcing exposed many irregular workers to danger without sufficient training or safety equipment, which often leads to accidents.
We need fundamental measures to prevent tragic accidents involving laborers. What we need first is to find out whether any regulations were violated or whether there were attempts to avoid fully reporting the accident. We also need measures to address outsourcing in the power plant sector.
The revision will entail holding contractors more responsible, limiting the outsourcing of dangerous work, and stepping up sanctions to prevent industrial accidents. The government also vowed to monitor overall safety management obligations and deal with any violations severely. Besides that, they're seeking to add industrial accidents involving subcontractors to the criteria when the government assesses public corporations. Rival parties for now have agreed on the need to deal with the bill as soon as possible. The National Assembly's Labor Committee will hold a hearing on the issue this Friday and aims to have the bill ready for a vote by the last plenary session of the year next Thursday. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
Stephen Biegun is visiting the nation to meet with his South Korean counterpart Lee Do-hun. And upon arrival, the American nuke envoy read out a surprise statement linked to allowing aid to Pyongyang. Lee Ji-won shares with us his remarks.
Moments after his arrival Wednesday at the airport, U.S. Special Representative for North Korea Stephen Biegun said the U.S. will review its policies on humanitarian assistance for North Korea so that aid can be delivered without hurting the sanctions' effectiveness.
Toward that end, upon my return to Washington, D.C. next week, I've been directed by Secretary of State Pompeo to review United States policy on humanitarian assistance provided to the DPRK by private and religious American organizations.
Biegun said that humanitarian aid organizations operating on the North are concerned that the strict enforcement of sanctions has sometimes gotten in the way of delivering humanitarian aid to the North Korean people. He added that he will be sitting down with those groups early next year to discuss how to better ensure that aid is delivered, especially this winter. This would include possibly allowing American citizens to travel to the north to help with delivery and to monitor aid programs. The surprise announcement comes as Biegun arrived for a 4-day visit to Seoul to hold a series of talks with the Special Representative for Korean Peninsula Peace and Security Affairs Lee Do-hun. The two will have their first meeting on Thursday, in which they will resume their discussion on North Korea's denuclearization, including the results of recent contacts between Pyongyang and Washington, as well as strategies on the nuclear issue for next year. The two diplomats will meet again on Friday, but this time as the heads of the South Korea-U.S. Working Group on North Korea. This is the second time the group is meeting face-to-face, the first time being last month when Lee visited Washington. In two separate sessions, the group will cover issues regarding North Korea's denuclearization negotiations, the inter-Korean exchanges, and working within the sanctions framework. Biegun is also expected to meet with Seoul's unification minister and possibly officials at the Blue House as well. Lee Ji-won, Arirang News.
Progress in nuclear negotiations this coming February or March will determine how things go on the Korean peninsula for the next 2 years. That's the analysis from South Korea's unification minister. Kim Jong-yang said 2019 will be a critical year in view of the political goals the relevant countries want to achieve domestically by the year 2020. If nuclear negotiations don't get fully underway by early next year, he said it could be hard for them to ever get going. Joe added that this would naturally affect inter-Korean relations as well. As for why February or March, an anonymous ministry official explained that the U.S. House of Representatives, now in the hands of the Democrats, could restrict President Trump's North Korea policies when the new Congress is sworn in at the end of January. The official added that Pyongyang won't turn its back on the ongoing dialogue, but it will call for reciprocal measures from Washington. Prime Minister Lee Nak-yeon said sanctions targeting North Korea can only be eased with the agreement of the international community. During his tour of Daewoo Engineering and Construction's Razjinet power plant on his third day in Algeria on Tuesday local time, he said that North Korea's power supply infrastructure was underdeveloped and that Seoul was interested in cooperating with Pyongyang in the power supply sector. But he added that any further talks on the sector may be against the UN sanctions on the regime. The Prime Minister reiterated that despite North Korea's denuclearization being a precondition, South Korea should prepare for economic cooperation with the North. Seoul's PM arrived in Morocco later on Tuesday, the second destination on his visit to North Africa. Seoul plans to spend over $620,000 from its Inter-Korean Cooperation Fund on the groundbreaking ceremony for linking and modernizing inter-Korean railways and roads. The event is scheduled for December 26th at Panmun Station, just north of the border, and is to be attended by 100 officials, each from South and North Korea. Despite what the ceremony is being called, the two Koreas won't actually break ground. The event is being held largely for symbolic meaning, and actual construction will begin in accordance with progress in Pyongyang's denuclearization and waivers on international sanctions. Data released by Statistics Korea shows Seoul and Pyongyang have huge differences in certain areas, including the economy. The report indicates the gap in life expectancy was especially high last year. Park Hee-jun helped us look beyond the digits.
The life expectancy of North Koreans remains considerably lower than that of South Koreans. According to a report released by Statistics Korea on Wednesday, North Korean men had a life expectancy of 66.3 years, while North Korean women had 73.1. That's more than 10 years below that of South Korean men, who live an average of 79.5 years, and women who live 85.6 years. The gap has been clearly growing since the late 1990s, and in 2017, the difference in life expectancy for South and North Korean men was the biggest it's ever been, at 13.2 years. Data also show that North Korea's population is less than half of that of South Korea. It also indicates that the total population of the Korean peninsula stood at 76.4 million. The biggest gap of all is evident in the two Koreas' economies. According to the report, North Korea's total gross national income per capita was just $1,300, while South Korea had 23 times that number at $30,000. The gap was especially big since the North's economy shrank last year by 3.5%, its worst performance in 20 years. South Korea, on the other hand, saw 3.1% growth. And the North's poor economic performance was also reflected in its trade. The country's total trade volume in 2017 was around $5.5 billion, and over 90% of that was trade with China. That's $982 million less than the previous year, and a whopping 190 times smaller than South Korea's trade volume of more than $1 trillion. Park Hee-jun, Arirang News.
South Korea and China held defense talks on Monday at the working level about the security situation on the Korean peninsula. Meeting for the 17th time since 1995, military officials from Seoul and Beijing discussed the comprehensive military agreement South and North Korea signed in September and how it has been implemented so far. Both sides acknowledged the need for the international community's support and for cooperation between countries to bring lasting peace to the Korean peninsula. They also agreed to strengthen strategic cooperation between South Korea and China to build trust between their militaries. President Moon Jae-in congratulated the recently elected chief of Interpol, who became the first Korean to hold the post. Meeting with Kim Jong-yang at the top office, the South Korean leader called the accomplishment a victory for the nation and said Kim is a source of great pride for the country, having won that election last month by a large margin. The president told Kim that he will be able to raise Interpol's status by boosting cooperation with countries to more effectively fight international crimes like terrorism. Before being elected the head of the global law enforcement body, Kim Jong-yang started out in the South Korean police in 1992, rising to the post of chief of police in Gyeonggi-do province and retired in 2015 to become a vice president at Interpol. 3 high school students were found dead and 7 others unconscious on Tuesday in Gangneung after being poisoned by carbon monoxide. Out of those 7, 2 have now regained consciousness. Hong Yu has the latest.
A second student has regained consciousness out of the 7 that were found in a critical condition after suffering carbon monoxide poisoning at a guest house in Gangneung.
On Wednesday morning, we finished the second hyperbaric oxygen treatment, and 1 student has recovered to the point of being capable of communication. 1 additional student is partially responding to our questions. 2 others are showing signs of recovery, but we still have to wait and see. 1 of them has a tracheal intubation.
Taking the doctor's advice, the students will not be moved from Wonju Severance Christian Hospital to other hospitals for further hyperbaric oxygen treatment. The police and the National Forensic Service investigating the accident found 8 times the normal level of carbon monoxide in the room the students were found in.
The head of the Central Forensic Medical Center conducted an autopsy and found the concentration of carbon monoxide in the blood well above the lethal dose, confirming the cause of death as carbon monoxide poisoning, as no other toxic substances were detected.
The gas boiler of the room was found disconnected from the stovepipe and is believed to have produced a lot of exhaust gas. A second round of investigation started today at 2 p.m. to find the exact cause of the accident. The investigators are running combustion tests with the gas boiler and the stovepipe to analyze the composition of exhaust gas produced. Hong Yu, Arirang News.
Despite ongoing tensions between Washington and Beijing, South Korea's trade with China continues to grow. According to the nation's trade ministry, through November, the trade volume between the two sides for 2018 came to around $247.3 billion, up more than 13% on year. Seoul's strong exports of semiconductors and petroleum products are seen as key contributors. Total outbound shipments to China hiked more than 17%. To keep the trend going, the ministry explains it's necessary to enhance the competitiveness of consumer goods and service exports. Ramen, one of the country's most popular food exports. For the first time, the instant noodles are expected to reach $400 million of annual outbound shipments. According to Korea Agro-Fisheries and Food Trade Cooperation, this year's ramen exports reached a record $385 million by November, overtaking last year's total of $345 million. Growing popularity in the U.S. and Southeast Asia are seen as key contributing factors. In America, sales are expanding to large retail outlets, while in Southeast Asia, spicy ramen has a growing fan base. Roughly 40% of foreign workers in the nation are in temporary employment, but the number of those who earn a living wage has increased. Choi Si-young breaks down the report by Statistics Korea.
There are 930,000 foreign workers in South Korea, excluding recently naturalized citizens, and about 40% of those workers make a living through a temporary job. The number of foreign workers in temporary employment has increased by 14% on year. Temporary employment is defined as having an employment contract of less than 12 months in length. The number of foreign workers who make less than $1,800 or 2 million won, considered an approximation of the monthly living wage, stood at around 40%. That figure is 5% lower than last year, something that Statistics Korea attributes to the rise in the legal minimum wage this year. Out of 13,500 foreign workers interviewed for the survey, about 70% say they were satisfied with their work. while only 5% are discontent with their jobs. Roughly 60% said they were also satisfied with how much they earn, whereas 11% were not satisfied. About 45% of the foreign workforce are in the manufacturing industry, followed by 19% in the food and lodging sectors and 16% in the public sector. 최시영, Arirang News.
The National Museum of Korea is holding a special exhibition to celebrate 1,100 years since the founding of the Goryeo dynasty. The museum hoped to display the statue of Biegun, which belongs to North Korea, but it is still waiting for Pyongyang to land the statue to Seoul. Yoon Jung-min provides a glimpse of what to expect.
2018 marks 1,100 years since the medieval Korean kingdom of Goryeo was founded. To commemorate the anniversary, the National Museum of Korea is hosting a special exhibition, Goryeo, the Glory of Korea, from December 4th until March 3rd next year. The exhibition introduces masterpieces and items used in the royal palace as well as pieces of Buddhist art. Founded in 918, Goryeo prospered on the Korean peninsula until 1392. The dynasty traded with foreign countries and was so well known to foreigners that the roots of the word Korea come from the word Goryeo.
Amid the rapid changing situation in East Asia, Goryeo lasted as a kingdom for 475 years. To celebrate 1,100 years since its foundation, 450 relics from museums and institutions around the world have been brought all the way to Seoul for this exhibition.
The exhibition shows the empire's artistic accomplishments through paintings, pottery, and sculptures, which were made from the delicate touch of the craftsmen of the time. As Buddhism prospered, Goryeo left many pieces of religious art, such as the painting of the Amitabha Buddha.
It was impressive to witness the technology and culture of Goryeo. I was proud. It's good that I saw what I'd learnt in textbooks right before my eyes.
An empty glass case sits right next to the statue of Master Arirang, who was a spiritual mentor of Biegun, the founder of Goryeo. The National Museum originally planned to display the statue of Biegun, which belongs to North Korea, but the statue is still in Pyongyang right now. During the first Inter-Korean summit, South Korean President Moon Jae-in asked his North Korean counterpart Kim Jong-un to send cultural relics for the exhibition from the north, including the statue. Chairman Kim agreed to cooperate then, but Pyongyang has not sent the relics yet. The museum left the space empty in the hope that the relics can be added sometime during the exhibition. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News.
Time to turn to Michelle Bach for the latest weather updates. Michelle, Seoul and most of the northern provinces have recovered good quality air.
Yes, Daniel, now highly polluted air continues to bother us these days, and currently many regions are still under a thick layer of ultrafine dust. In Gwangju, a warning has been issued with the dust accumulating more than 100 micrograms per cubic meter, raising the fine dust alert to very bad, so keep those masks on. And the polluted air will be upon us tomorrow under mostly cloudy skies, while Jeju Island and some of the southern coast are expecting to receive some rain with gusty wind. At the same time, Beijing and Tokyo will get cloudier into the day with mild highs. Checking the morning lows, Seoul will start the morning with 1 degree Celsius, Busan at 9, while Jeju makes it into the low teens. And it's going to be less cloudy into our afternoon with daily highs between 9 and 13 degrees Celsius across the whole nation. And this week will remain mild and dusty, but then on Christmas Eve, a cold wind will blow in again, bringing down the mercury. I'll leave you with the weather conditions around the world.
That's all we could pack into tonight's edition of Arirang News Center. Wherever you may be tuning in from, thank you for staying with us.